Coming up on Arirang News, CNN reports that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is in grave danger after having supposedly having heart surgery, citing an official in the U.S. But South Korea says there's no sign of an emergency or anything out of the ordinary. South Korea's exports hit hard by the coronavirus pandemic, down so far this month by almost 27% from a year ago. Semiconductors, cars, and petroleum products down significantly. And the Secretary-General of the OECD says that while the global economy is headed for a major downturn, South Korea will be among the countries that recovers the fastest, thanks to its quick response to the pandemic and the government's support for the economy. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for joining us on Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. CNN's been reporting today that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is in grave danger after what its source in the U.S. said was an operation. But the South Korean government says there are no signs of anything unusual. Our Hong Yu reports.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is residing in a rural part of the country with his closest aides, that's according to the South Korean government. A CNN report on Tuesday claimed that Kim is in grave danger after having heart surgery earlier this month. But South Korea's government official familiar with the matter said there is nothing out of the ordinary to suspect about Kim Jong-un's health, nor are there signs of an emergency or any unusual developments. It was deduced that CNN's source, a U.S. official, had made an assumption based on Kim Jong-un's having not made a public appearance for 10 consecutive days, even on his grandfather's birthday, April 15th. But there are mixed reports. Reuters reported that Kim is not believed to be critically ill, citing an official with the Chinese Communist Party's International Liaison Department. Daily NK, an online newspaper based in Seoul that focuses on North Korea, reported that Kim is recovering from heart surgery. It said most of the medical team in charge had returned to Pyongyang after Kim's condition had improved. His last appearance on state media was on April 11th when he held a meeting with the ruling Workers' Party, during which they discussed how to prevent an outbreak of COVID-19 and elected Kim Yo-jong, Kim Jong-un's sister, as an alternate member of the bureau. Hong Yu, Arirang News.
South Korea's exports have taken a massive hit from the coronavirus pandemic. It was clear that they would contract, but now we know that so far this month they're down almost 27% from the same time last year. Kim Jae-hee reports.
South Korea's exports fell sharply from a year earlier in the first 20 days of April due to the economic fallout from the coronavirus pandemic. According to data released by the Korea Customs Service on Tuesday, the country's outbound shipments from April 1st to April 20th came to some $21.7 billion, down a whopping 26.9% from the same period a year earlier. The daily average exports during this period also slipped 16.8% on year. The decline was attributed to the coronavirus pandemic, which has paralyzed trade and disrupted production all across the globe, with numerous countries having shut down their borders. By segment, overseas sales of semiconductors, South Korea's key export item, fell 14.9% on year over the 20-day period. Exports of automobiles also declined 28.5% from a year earlier. Auto parts fared even worse, sinking 49.8%, and exports of petrochemical goods tumbled 53.5%. By destination country, exports to China dropped 17% on year, and shipments to the U.S. also shrank 17.5%. Exports to Japan were down 20%, and those to the EU were even worse, down 32.6% on year. The same data also shows that in the first 20 days of April, imports fell 18.6% on year to near $25.2 billion. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
The global economy could be facing a downturn the likes of which have not been seen since the 1930s. The extent of it is far from clear, but the Secretary-General of the OECD tells Arirang News in an exclusive interview that South Korea will see a smaller economic impact than others. Oh Soo-young has this story.
South Korea could become one of the first countries to bounce back from the COVID-19 recession. That's according to the OECD Secretary-General Angel Gurria, who said the Korean economy could get through the crisis relatively unscathed, owing to its innovative measures to contain the pandemic.
You were better prepared, that the measures were more effective, that Korea had equipped itself and was not only ready, but had the necessary infrastructure. They did not have to improvise. That you also isolated the ones who had the contagion, and then you even created some new modalities of testing and then isolating, like the drive-through method, for example, the telephone booth methods. So the world has a lot to learn from Korea. And you can see there's no division between economy and the war against the virus.
The Secretary-General also highlighted Korea's comprehensive measures designed to ease the pain of the economic fallout. These include income and corporate tax reductions for small business owners and plans to distribute basic income to individual households. Korea warned that governments, businesses and households across the world face a mounting debt crisis, unable to pay their bills or creditors due to the stunted cash flow. He said developing countries will be especially hard hit.
This is very important to make sure that instead of paying their creditors, they're focusing on the virus and they're focusing on the patients, they're focusing on their people. But after that, they will need to reinforce their structures, and the wounds and then the scars will be even deeper and greater.
He called for global coordination on debt repayment and the sharing of innovative policies to help the world overcome this borderless pandemic. Young, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, global strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, thank you for coming on today, as always.
Thank you for having me today.
Well, the big story today is something you mentioned when we talked a couple of weeks ago, oil prices going negative. On the face of it, this sounds somewhat absurd. So what does it mean and what's next?
Right. Well, if this is the futures contract, and it is tied to the specific delivery date, and the maturity is today. So basically, the price could go down to the negative territories if they were trying to hedge the position of the oil producers. If you look at the price decline, this was related to the cost of inventories. So clearly, this was the major implication for the oil prices decline. But if you look at it, the futures market is highly leveraged. So it can bounce from anywhere between plus minus 50% relative to fair value. If you look at the fair price of the oil right now, we might think that it might be around $30 if you're looking forward to the forward future of July and August prices. But nevertheless, that is much lower than the previous 1 year ago prices. Therefore, the oil producers were trying to hedge that position by shorting the futures. So clearly, that caused the short-term negative price, which we never seen in the past. Clearly, this is from the COVID-19 implication, but nevertheless, the futures market can be very volatile. In terms of the implication for the overall market, we think that because the long futures contract prices are at around $28 to $30 level, we think that the implication in the longer term is not that significant. And we are seeing rapid decline of the oil rig counts in the U.S., as well as the supply reduction that we are expecting somewhere around 10 million to 20 million barrels per day into the future. So supply and demand cycle will probably normalize after this incident. However, though, as long as the COVID-19 issue remains such that the closure of borders or the cars moving is really stopped at this point in time, then the oil price will remain to be pressured downward. Hopefully we'll see opening up the borders and opening up the economy by sometime in May. If that's the case, then oil price on a longer term basis of going to the $30 would be more likely case.
Right. Well, the plunge in oil prices hit stocks on Wall Street, Korean shares down as well today. But that was also on these unverified reports that North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un could be in grave danger health-wise. What's the story on the stock markets?
Right. As you said, CNN kind of said that the U.S. is monitoring intelligence that North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un is in grave danger after surgery. But it seems that news are coming out that it might not be right, that he is still fine. But in any case, that caused the market to tumble for Kospi going down as low as -3% and Kosdaq going down by as large as -5.6% intraday, along with the news of this oil price going to negative territories in futures. However, though, if you look at the history of North Korea issues in regards to the death of the leader, if you look at the Kim Il-sung case and the Kim Jong-il case, we saw equity market did a short-term correction, but in a longer-term basis of 6 to 12 months, it showed a quite strong run. So, of course, people are saying that there's nobody to take over the leadership after, if in case Kim Jong-un dies. But we think that, though, overall market volatility will not last for a very long period of time. I think that we should be watching much more closely of what's happening to the COVID-19 impact on economy, whether or not economy can open up nicely in the future. As you already know that the Korea have reduced the level of the barriers in terms of the economic activities at this point in time as of today. So a lot of people are going back to work, and the social distance is, much lesser strict at this point in time. All being said, that we think the economic growth rate could recover gradually. Hopefully that this happens to other countries, not yet for most of other countries, but over the next 1 month to 2 month period, we think that the trend should be in the right direction.
Well, exports are down too. Data showing in the first 20 days of this month they were down by almost 27%. What do you make of these numbers, and what's been the effect on the markets?
Well, clearly it is negative news that South Korea's export plunged nearly 27% in the first 20 days. This is the exact opposite of 9.3% growth rate in a previous month. But we already expected this because we are seeing all these economic activities slowing down rapidly for most of other countries. So having said that, if you look at the details of these numbers, you see that the semiconductor sales were down by 14.9%, but it is much lesser than other overall 27% drop. Clearly, this is because of the Fourth Industrial Revolution-related DRAM demand is quite strong still, nevertheless. But other industries like petrochemical products, of course, it will plunge by 53.5%. And then car components and the wireless devices all down somewhere between 49.8% and 30.7%. But clearly we can see that the electronics goods and the DRAM side is relatively less than the overall shipment drop of 27%. So what that means is that Korea might be in a relatively better position in terms of the export mixture, and that if the economic activities resume, say in June and July, we will see a very significant rise of the export numbers or recovery of the export numbers. So we are expecting demand to sharply recover sometime in July and August. If that's the case, market correction might not be as severe as March. And as you can see that the Korean market, despite all these negative news, it recovered nicely and it ended with only 1% drop. So 3% drop actually recovered to -1%, which is definitely a good news. We think that the overall liquidity in the system is very large, that liquidity alone could push the equity market further higher in the future.
All right, Mr. Yu, we'll have to leave it there for today. Thanks so much for coming on and sharing your insights.
Thank you very much.
For one thing, demand continues to grow for South Korea's COVID-19 test kits. They're being shipped now to 117 countries. The governor of the U.S. state of Maryland requested them personally. Our Jang Tae-hyun tells us more.
Countries are ramping up their testing, so they're trying to get more test kits from Korea. The planes used to send the kits to those countries will also be used to bring back Korean nationals who are stuck there. In the U.S., Maryland has acquired 500,000 of the kits. Maryland Governor Larry Hogan and the state's First Lady personally welcomed the Korean plane that arrived with the kits on Saturday. Hogan and his wife, who was born in Korea, had asked for the kits in March in a personal request to the South Korean ambassador, and he acknowledged the role of top Korean officials in providing them.
And I want to personally thank President Moon Jae-in, Prime Minister Chung, Ambassador Lee, and Prime Minister Hong.
South Korea's Ministry of SMEs and Startups says the country's exports of virus test kits of all kinds in January and February worth $21 million, which is around 36% more than a year earlier.
First, we asked the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety for emergency approval for COVID-19 test kits. It helped Korean startups get approval. Then we helped them make connections overseas to export them. Korean test kits are getting more attention from all around the world, so we are exporting them under the name Brand K.
The Ministry of SME said that South Korea is shipping the kits to 117 countries, including Italy, Morocco, and Saudi Arabia, and this unexpected demand has led to a shortage of labor for these manufacturers. Jang Tae-hyun, Arirang News.
That brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.
COVID-19 has led to global panic buying across the world, but there is one country unaffected by this crisis, and that's South Korea. Despite the fears of COVID-19 spreading across the world, there is no panic buying here.